Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Some of you have been writing, and I know you as our regular watchers because I follow your comments every day dutifully. Some of you have been complaining that you've OD'd, overdosed on Afghanistan, and you are tired of that story. So I should talk about something else, particularly domestic politics. So deferring to you, there is much to talk about on Afghanistan, but we'll do that on another day. That story isn't going to go away, nor is Indian politics going to go away. It's always going to be exciting and interesting. And today we look at a very interesting and important trend in our national politics by picking up a straw in the wind from distant Assam. Assam, as we know, is not a particularly large state. But what is it that we pick up from politics in Assam that gives us an indication of some big changes at the national level? Now, in Assam, the Congress party, which is the opposition party, it's been in opposition now for the second term. The Congress party has broken its relationship with AIUDF. AIUDF is All India United Democratic Front, led by Badruddin Ajmal. He's the old perfume trader from a place called Hojai in Assam. Hojai is known for trading traditionally in perfumes made out of agar. Agar is a tree, so the name agarbatti comes from agar, and the perfumes made from that tree, from agar or Aquilaria as it's called, are very popular in the Middle East. That's how he made his fortune, and then from that the business grew, and from that he joined politics and built this party, which has over time begun to attract a lot of the Muslim vote. So in some ways, he is to the Muslim vote in Assam what Asaduddin Owaisi is to Muslim vote in Telangana or Hyderabad. Now, you might say that Asad Owaisi matters in Hyderabad, the inner city of Hyderabad. So his signature is limited to that area, or his footprint or his foothold or his political hold is limited to that area, that is inner Hyderabad. And he makes a difference elsewhere, but not that much. Assam, on the other hand, has a large Muslim population, as much as West Bengal. So about 33%. 1 in 3 voters is Muslim. The reason Congress hopes to win in Assam is because they think that all the Muslims will vote for them, and plus they will get tribals, tea garden, this and that, the usual Congress mix. Now, Ajmal's rise has cut into that vote. So Ajmal has been getting a bunch of Muslim vote, and increasingly more Muslims are voting for him, particularly say in lower Assam, where Muslim population is much larger per constituency. So the Congress found it expedient to align with him in the last assembly elections earlier this year. And as we know, in the results, Congress did not do so well. The BJP won that election with a comfortable majority. The Congress increased its number a little bit from 26 to 29 in a house of 126, mind you. And AIUDF also increased its number exactly by 3 as with the Congress, from 13 to 16. So 45 in a house of 126. Didn't work out. Now the Congress has decided to break away. And why have they broken away? So on the surface, the explanation is that some leaders of AIUDF have been praising the BJP government, particularly the brother of the founder of AIUDF, that is Badruddin Ajmal's brother. His name is Sirajuddin Ajmal. He said in the precincts of the assembly in 3rd week of July, so that was more than a month back, that, why should people be upset if I praise my chief minister? Now, hello, he is the BJP chief minister against whom you fought the last election just very recently, just months back. And he said that if somebody does good work, am I not supposed to praise him? And I think he also said our CM is doing really well. He's undertaken some good initiatives and schemes. When that happened, the Congress party said, this is the last straw. We never trusted this guy too much. Now we are breaking off. So Congress party has broken off. Now, there is an interesting trend. The interesting trend is that Congress party has aligned with many of these Muslim groups or Muslim leaders and has then broken off. So if I take you right back to 2012, right, until then, Asaduddin Owaisi was a member of the UPA. In fact, when that voting on the nuclear deal took place, vote of confidence, He was among those who delivered the most passionate defense of the nuclear deal in support of the Congress government. By 2012, he had gone away because Congress party had begun to believe by then that he was cutting into their vote share. Now, that is when Congress party again tried to bring him back, and they sent Digvijay Singh to Hyderabad for a meeting. He went to meet Digvijay Singh, but by that time he was a bit shy of meeting Digvijay Singh. So he actually went wearing a helmet, so he won't be easily recognized. Also, knowing Asaduddin Owaisi and his countenance and how he looks and walks, it's very difficult. Anybody in Hyderabad would miss Asaduddin Owaisi just because he has a helmet on. But Congress tried, but the fact is that since then, the Congress has not gone with him. They haven't trusted him. So in the recent West Bengal election also, in the larger alliance between Congress and the left, they also included Abbas Sharif, or generally known as Furfura Sharif, who's again a clergyman, and he runs a small party called Indian Secular Front, again targeting the Muslim vote, and that did not work out. And after that, there was a lot of criticism about that tie-up from Digvijay Singh, but also from this group of 23 or G23 as it's called in the Congress party. Now, what is the interesting thing? You might say that why are you saying national politics, Congress party? What does the Congress party count for? Now, it isn't just the Congress party. It is a larger phenomenon in Indian politics. Today, you have a situation where, say, in the run-up to the West Bengal elections, we saw Mamata Banerjee reciting Chandi Path, many other prayers, mantras. So she was at pains to make the point that she's not anti-Hindu and she's as much of a Hindu as anybody else. If anything, she is more of a practicing Hindu than even, say, the BJP RSS people. She's a very persuasive speaker, so she also did that successfully. But she was at pains to do that. She was also very cautious not to project a pro-Muslim image too much. So there is, even someone like Mamata Banerjee is having to nuance her position. The Congress party. In 2014, Congress party lost an election. Whenever Congress party loses a big election, there's an Antony committee, AK Antony committee. Even when they lost in 1996, there was an AK Antony committee. So in 1996, AK Antony committee blamed economic reform for Congress's defeat. And 2014, the AK Antony committee blamed the increased or the perception of an increased proximity with Muslims or a pro-Muslim image as the cause or one of the key causes of the Congress's defeat. It's also characteristic of these Antony committee reports that they are never made public, right? They stay like state secrets of the Congress party. But it is well known that his 96 report blamed the reform. His 2014 report blamed a pro-Muslim image. Now, whether Congress party had a pro-Muslim image or not, but definitely BJP under Narendra Modi had a very strong pro-Hindutva and pro-Hindu image. Nevertheless, you see the corrections the Congress party made after that. Shortly after that, Rahul Gandhi started visiting temples. You saw his Janeudhari avatar. You also learned about his Gotra, Dattatreya, right? And everybody in Congress began talking about this. And then you can see since then, generally, Congress has been shy of being seen with Muslim groups. Now, what happens is that everybody now gets worried. Arvind Kejriwal, his party is now carrying out this Tiranga Yatra. His party, as the Congress, hardly has a prominent Muslim leader. So they are carrying out a Tiranga Yatra. He was not seen anywhere near Shaheen Bagh protests. Also, with all these cases, Umar Khalid and all the rest jailed for such a long time. At best, with the flimsiest of charges, right? You see, Aam Aadmi Party is very careful talking about any of that. So you can see that all the key parties opposing the BJP right now also don't want to be seen to be Muslim friendly, nor do they want to be seen to be aligned with Muslims. Again, this reflects in larger political decisions and posturing and the positions that they take in Parliament. So Article 370, I had written a national interest in 2019 before the elections, saying that doesn't matter who wins or loses, BJP may win or lose, but the RSS can declare victory because all its key issues every party is now forced to agree on. So Article 370 is the Congress party saying that they will restore it once they come back? No. Maybe some odd Congress politician said so, but the party never said so. Did the party vote against it? No. CAA, which party opposes it and which party voted against it? You count. Similarly, Triple Talaq, the bill, which party voted against it and which party abstained? So these are convenient abstentions. Sabrimala, Rahul Gandhi first said that women should be allowed. Then he said that was his personal view and that his party's view in the state is different from his. So once again, all the key issues that RSS and BJP put forward or that they've been promoting, now it looks like all their opposition parties are agreeing on these. And that is the big change in national politics. See the BSP. BSP has just held a big Brahmin Sammelan in Ayodhya. They've also hailed the temple. Samajwadi Party, Akhilesh Yadav, he said the Ram belongs to us. And in fact, he said we are Ram Bhakt and Krishan Bhakt. If I may remind him, in fact, his father once in a Walk the Talk interview with me had said, we are definitely Hindus and we are not against Hinduism. मैं तो बिल्कुल Hanuman भक्त हूँ. And fact is that when he left his official house in Delhi, which later Arun Jaitley moved into as Defense and Finance Minister, that house in under one tree also had a tiny Hanuman temple with Arun Jaitley preserved like that. And in fact, he would proudly show his guests around saying that this is the temple that Mulayam Singh Yadav had built. But Mulayam Singh Yadav kept it understated and was never shy of his friendliness to the Muslims. Now everybody feels under pressure to do this. In fact, even after the disaster in West Bengal, after the Congress left and Furfura Sharif, that is ISF, Indian Secular Front Alliance, did not work, it came a cropper. Jitin Prasada, who was then with Congress, subsequently in the BJP, he had blamed the left for bringing that cleric into the fold. So here is a conclusion that non-BJP party and anti-BJP parties also are being saffronized. One indication of that saffronization is they don't want to be seen seeking the Muslim vote actively. Second, they are now afraid of using the camouflage secular for the Muslim vote because they don't want to be seen to be seeking the Muslim vote. They think that Muslims have to vote against the BJP anyway, so they will vote for us. What is happening with Muslim vote on the other hand? That this has led to the rise of Muslim leaders. This has led to the rise of Owaisi, and Owaisi is now finding oomph in other states in the country also. Say in the last Bihar elections, his party won, AIMIM won 5 seats in Bihar. If only Congress and RJD had combined or aligned with his party, maybe given him 5 more seats or 10 more seats, then together and also by avoiding the vote division of Muslim votes, they would have got enough to rule the state. They were very close to beating JDU, BJP. They just fell short by about 10 seats. That would have happened if they had given AIMIM the space in their coalition. But one, they don't want to share their Muslim vote with anybody. Second, they don't want to be seen to be seeking the Muslim vote and aligning with those who, without any hesitation, seek the Muslim vote. So this dilemma or this duvidha is also causing the opposition quite a bit of damage as the Muslim votes getting divided, and the BJP is the beneficiary. So here is where most of these opposition parties are now ending up, particularly the Congress. Because see, Mamata Banerjee, with everything she's been able to nuance her position, she's kept the Muslim vote with her. And for her, the threat is not that Muslim vote will go to the BJP. The threat has always been that the Muslim vote might go to the left and the Congress. So she has said, and she does enough to convince the Muslims that they are much safer, or their interests are much more protected under her than under Congress and the left. In any case, in a situation like that, Muslims will go with the obvious winner against the BJP, not with the fringe party, which is how Congress and left looked in West Bengal. Other parties, because they've nuanced their position completely, this has now helped the BJP. But the Congress party, on the other hand, has suffered most of all because as it gets weaker in state after state, Muslim vote is shifting to other parties because Muslim vote will go to the party that is seen to be most likely to beat the BJP or is seen to be most likely to speak for the Muslims and stand up to the BJP. That's why we found in Maharashtra several Muslim voting groups voting for Asad Owaisi's party now. Aurangabad, for example. We saw this example in Bihar, in Assam with Ajmal, and you will see more such forces coming up wherever the Congress is the preeminent opposition to the BJP. So what happened to the Congress in this case? First, they decided to aim for the secular vote and decided to be with Muslim groups. Then in panic, when that didn't work, they gave up. They tried to be overly Hindu and Janeu and Gotra and temple visits and all that. Then in the middle, they also flirted with these alliances, one in West Bengal, then in Assam. Now they are getting out of that also. So this is a case of, if you want me to use Urdu, I can say, na khuda hi mila na visale sanam, na idhar ke rahe, na udhar ke rahe. Neither did I find God, nor a tryst with my lover. I was left in the middle of nowhere. या हिंदी में अगर आप कहना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि उर्दू से आपको लगेगा कि लोग कहेंगे कि नहीं ये तो अभी आप मुस्लिम पॉलिटिक्स की बात कर रहे हैं, तो मैं हिंदी में बताऊंगा क्योंकि थोड़ा ब्राह्मणिज्म की भी बहुत बात है. किसी ने कहा भी कि मैं ब्राह्मण हूँ, तो कुछ ऐसे है, एज वी से इन द हार्टलैंड हिंदी, चौबे जी बनने गए थे छबे, रह गए दुबे. बिकॉज आफ्टर ऑल समबडी who's learned 4 Vedas can't learn 6 Vedas because there are no 6 Vedas. So you try and get the title of having learned 6 Vedas and you are reduced to somebody who learned only 2 Vedas, not 4. So Chaubey ji banne gaye the Chabbe, reh gaye Dubey. That is what's happening to the Congress party vis-a-vis the minority vote right now and vis-a-vis its larger appeal to the middle ground Indian voter. So before I let you go, I'm also sharing this image with you. This image is from a tweet. It's a image that we will remember, the world will remember for a very long time. Image from Kabul. This is the family or family members of the family that got wiped out by the American strike, the family of innocent people, including lots of children that was wiped out. So this is at the burial. So while the relatives and friends and the larger family have come in to bury those who've been killed, American fighter jets are flying overhead. So see, all of them are looking up at those fighter jets. It's quite a striking image, you know. It reminds me of that old Gopal Das Neeraj song, Karma Guzar Gaya Gubar Dekhte Rahe, right? But it also reminds me of how fearful you can be when you have these planes in an environment like that and you don't know whether they will start dropping bombs or not, and if they do, who will the bomb come for? So it takes me back to 1991. That is when we were covering the first Gulf War. That is after Saddam Hussein had occupied Kuwait. And we were driving, Prashant Panjiyar, my photographer colleague, and I, we were driving from Amman to Baghdad while the war was on. And as we reached closer to Baghdad, we came to a bridge on Euphrates River. Iraq, as you know, has 2 big rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, right? That's why it is such a fertile country and that valley is so fertile. And so many civilizations came up there. So we came to the bridge on Euphrates that did not look like a bridge on Euphrates because it's a big river. So we were told that the big bridge, the regular bridge, has already been demolished by F-16s bombing from overhead. So this was a chota bridge, like one of those steel bridges, old-time steel bridges, from which at any given point of time, only you could either go this way or you could come this way because it was very narrow and they had made arrangements for traffic to pass in phases. So for some time, traffic went from Amman towards Iraq, towards Baghdad. Sometimes it was traffic leaving Baghdad for which the bridge was open. So we were in the middle of the bridge, when everything stopped. So it was our turn to cross the bridge. We were exactly in the middle of the bridge when everything stopped. and there were noises of planes flying, jets flying overhead. The only jets flying overhead then could be American or the American Alliance jets. A bridge was a legitimate target for them and a very juicy target for them. And if they had already taken down the main big concrete bridge, why would they want this steel old girder bridge to stay on for too long? So we thought that maybe a smart bomb was now coming at us. And we waited. There's nothing we could have done. We might have painted press on the top of the roofs of our cars, but there's no way the planes would see those. First of all, it was the night, and in any case, planes are too high to see those, even if it was luminescent paint. Second, that steel bridge had also covered the top quite a bit, so nobody would see us. So until the traffic opened, which was maybe about 15 minutes later, and we got across to the other side, there was always that fear that now it's coming for me, now it's coming for me, now it's coming for me. So that is the fear that this incident, this picture reminded me of. Now, what a comprehensive job that was done of bringing down bridges in that war. Please see this picture that we took. That is Prashant Panjiyar, my dear friend and photographer, and I in front of one of these bridges in Baghdad city. So see how comprehensively these bridges were broken and what kind of explosive power was used. So it wasn't a good feeling to be stuck in the middle of a legitimate target with fighter planes overhead. Now, Prashant and I have talked about a lot of our travels together a lot of the times. And both of us have said we'll write our memoirs and tell these stories. He's beaten me to it. So he's written his memoir now, a photographer's memoir, where he talks about the 59 big stories he covered as a journalist in a very illustrious career. 4 of those were in partnership with me. So those feature in his book. His book will be released in Delhi on September 25. And in fact, he has asked me to be in conversation with him, which I happily will be, and will share that conversation with you. So please wait for it and also look at this picture and imagine the fear in our minds on that night, late night, and also fear in the minds of these families in Kabul.